Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Now, we will learn about the concerns of large firms when it comes to issues related to technology transfer. Here, we will understand revenue versus rent dissipation effect. We will learn about their IP management and the corporate venturing. So, what is this revenue versus rent dissipation effect when it comes to licensing strategies of the large firms? When a company or large firm rather of transferring the technology, they may think of two forces which are now working in an opposite direction. The first is the revenue effect, the other is the profit dissipation effect. As the name suggests, the revenue effect means that the company will gather licensing and royalty revenues from the licensing process itself. Apart from that, there would be transaction cost. So once you have this number where you have a revenue which is coming from licensing and the royalty fees, maybe some kind of a lump sum payment that has been received from the company, minus the cost. These costs would include your transaction cost. Okay, so that is on one side. On the other side, what is happening? That because now you have licensed the technology to the other company, the price cost margin that you may enjoy in the market would actually reduce, okay, which might lead to reduction in the market share as such. So there is a benefit which will come from the first one. Please note this benefit actually accounts for the different costs that will be incurred in the contractual process. And then there is a cost which is because of the reduction in the market share. So clearly a company would now compute both of them and accordingly make the final decision. So then licensing activity will be supported if we see that these kind of costs are going to be now very minimal, or there are factors which are either reducing these costs or are responsible for having lower such cost as such. So licensor may limit the extent of PDE, that is one option where the specific action may be taken by the large firm. As a result, the profit dissipation effect, that is the reduction in the market share that they are getting, is rather reduced, or there might be specific characteristics of the technology itself which might now limit the PDE or reduce the profit dissipation effect. Let's understand them. So licensor may limit them by maybe imposing a quantity restrictions on the licensee, giving them exclusive territories where they know that this is not a market for us and we are never going to serve in this particular case. Unit royalties might be fixed to such as to control the licensee output as such. So here you will not, it's not like you're charging the higher fee only to make royalties for your own point, but you are charging the royalty higher which is having an impact on the licensee output, because from the licensee's point of view any amount or a per unit royalty charge is going to increase their cost of production, right? So if that cost of production increases, so clearly the output they will be doing would be rather reduced. So this is an action taken by the licensor in order to reduce their profit dissipation effect. But however, the potential threat to the licensor market doesn't disappear. It still remains, as you have now licensed your technology to the others. So what are the implications? Clearly, if you want to now look at both the benefits and the cost on one side, you have to see that the larger the market share of a company it is, they are much better off exploiting the technology in-house, because they are already having a very vast access to the distribution channels and also to the advertising companies. So if they're already large, then clearly it may be benefit for them more from the point of view also that their PDE is going to be much larger, right? So the dissipation effect which would be realized by the large firm by licensing is also going to be much large. And if the market share is small, then the firm may be able to increase profit by licensing in addition to the in-house. So if the company itself is smart, then what will happen? The revenue effect which we are going to talk about, this revenue effect can be now supported by, because the company is small, it may not be able to cater to a very big market, then why not license it and get a share of it also to your own kitty. Apart from that, licensing is more attractive when the licensee operate in a different market and is unlikely to compete very strongly. So suppose if you find that the particular technology that you have come up with has also implication in some other area which may not be directly linked to your market, then clearly in this case your PD is going to be very low. If that reduces, once again a firm will have the motivation to go for the licensing as such. Means that once the firms get engaged into licensing activity, they would have to now undertake their management of the intellectual property. In fact, for most of the firms, management of intellectual property is rather a very serious business. What we have found is that in some firms, in fact, management of IP has moved from licensing of non-core to become the central element of the technology itself. And such examples can be seen in the industries like semiconductor, electronics, where licensing and cross-licensing has become very important for the process of generating the revenues. Apart from that, what you find is that management also needs to be more active and positive when it comes to management of the IP. They cannot have a very reactive or a very passive approach, because the market is extremely competitive and there is a possibility that some kind of other use may happen of IP, and not having a active role will in that case can affect you negatively. So what we have found, apart from the IP management and licensing by the large firm, one very important feature of the new economy model, which is being talked about earlier, is that of a corporate venturing. So one example of it is being given when the genomic revolution was happening, and it was actually transforming the pharmaceutical sector at that point of a time, that a company, Lilly indeed, realized that it will, its future profit will now depend upon how fast they are able to catch up with this disruption. So a disruption is coming in the market. Now how fast we can catch up with that. So what did they do? So this company in 2001, it actually launched a corporate venture capital fund, right, in order to engage with the cutting edge biotech firms, and which were merely at that time point of a time was just the startup. So by 2013, Lilly Ventures has been involved in more than 30 such collaborations, many of which give its parent company valuable insight into the science of developing drug or by analyzing the biological data, etc. So then here, when we talk about large firms, they are better suited for exploitation than exploration. Like we just said, that they might be, because of the scale being very large, the limits might be there in terms of how much new products to introduce, etc. But when a disruption is coming in a market, when they know that the things are now not going to be the same as they used to be, for instance the introduction of electric vehicles in automobile sector which is going on, then what to do? The idea in that case may be to adapt either the incremental improvement of existing technology for commercialization of discoveries, then for making particular radical breakthrough. However, one can realize that it may not recognize or nurture new discoveries, especially if it doesn't relate to the firm's core operation and market. But in that case, what you find is that firms are now spinning off. They are getting into the, technologies as a new ventures, investing in those kind of startups in order to keep pace with the rapid change in the science and technology. I gave you an example of Lilly, right? So a corporate venturing has rather increased. So these ventures are funded and managed by the parent. They are like a patient capital. They invest in this new technologies and the scientific maybe breakthroughs, and as a result, they might also be able to benefit from the recent. So clearly, when they are venturing into these kind of an organizations, the agreements that they have to enter into with respect to technology transfer and with respect to the licensing agreements clearly is very important. Though there are certain concerns which has been raised by the others in terms of this corporate venturing. But if you think from a point of view of an individual very large firm, they may not be able to take very fast decisions with respect to the recent changes, whereas a small firm or a startup might be able to do so. So in this case, the many firms see this as a way of earning high financial returns as well as accomplish strategic objective as such. So because of the largeness of the company itself, there might be certain delays in the decision making process, etc. As a result, corporate venturing comes as a solution to getting involved and engaged with the recent technological breakthroughs. Let us see whether the challenges which are faced by the small firm are similar to those of large. Clearly, the answer is no, because the concerns of small firms are going to be very different. Now, from a smaller firm point of view, if they want to exploit the technology, clearly they must acquire the complementary assets. For a startup, the choice in that case will amount to a fundamental choice of the business model itself. And as we have discussed in detail, there is a trade-off involved of the cost of acquiring complementary asset and renting, lost or shared with their parents in a licensing deal. So on the one hand, you can have a cost of acquiring the complementary asset. Apart from that, you can, rents lost or shared with the parent in the licensing deal as such. So once again, the considerations are the same. But what is the difference here? If you think from a smaller firm point of view, the profit dissipation effect is not of a concern, right? So clearly, the focus of the small firms and the factors which will play an important role in determination of licensing for them are rather different. From the technology owners, in case if you find it's a small firm, they're also unlikely to get the full return from the technology. Why it's so? Because of the inefficiencies of the contract, differences in the bargaining power. So these are some of the points which can actually demotivate the small companies to license. They may think that because of the inefficient market for technology, particularly with respect to the contractual agreements being negotiated as well as being put into force, there can be problem. If that is the case, then clearly they may not be able to get the full return from their technology. Moreover, when a company is transacting with a smaller firm, a firm smaller than their own size, they may have a certain more bargaining or negotiating powers that can also act in against the small firms in terms of deciding whether to license. So but the main consideration remains same, that is the cost versus benefit. And here when you look at the benefits, then clearly they come from just generating the revenue, and the cost is essentially associated with respect to in-house exploitation. That is, if they want to do, that means to now invest in the complementary assets as such. Now on and understand the buyer's perspective as such. So buyer's perspective, clearly the positive factors which will play important role here is that they can increase the stock of technologies which are available for them, which will increase the value of their assets. And however, that doesn't mean that the company can simply absorb the technology. They need to ensure that what kind of an absorption capacity it has, what kind of a bargaining power they may have with respect to the seller, and whether there is a complementarity with respect to the existing setup that they have. One very major challenge which the buyers face is that of the NIS, that is not invented here syndrome, where you will find that the adaptation or the adoption of the particular technology is going to be less if it is not invented. There might be some resistance that they may face from within the organization when it comes to adoption of the technology which is not invented there as such. And when we think from a larger perspective of the impact of market for technology on the industry, Clearly, it leads to reduction in the barriers of technology. What we have seen is also the evolution of a specialized engineering firm, like we said in case of a biotechnology, semiconductor, etc., where the main focus of such companies is indeed on the coming up with the better technologies. Moreover, you'll find all these factors will in that case lead to a more competition within the particular industry, and as the result benefit the consumer. We will look at some of the concerns of the buyers, particularly that of the absorptive capacity, in detail now. Next, we will learn about absorptive capacity of the buyers, which is going to play a very important role in terms of adaptation of the now technology which is coming from the supplier. This particular concept is given by Cohen and Leventhal, and they define it as the ability to identify, assimilate, and exploit knowledge from the environment. In fact, this paper has received more than 51,000 citations. So you can imagine the importance of this particular concept when it comes to overall discussion, really, even not only with respect to markets for technology, but also economics of innovation. The way the authors have defined it, they talk about this process as something which is cumulative, which builds on what you do earlier, and it is also part dependent depending upon where your capabilities has been developed over a period of time. So absorptive capacity is not only refers to the acquisition or assimilation of information by an organization, but also the organization's ability to exploit it as such. Authors have pointed out that what we are looking at is a transition from merely an individual to an organization. Here, in this context, few aspects become very important. Which are those? That includes significance of the prior knowledge, which is there to help you understand, the capacity to learn, that is learning to learn, and the learning efforts, how much is being spent. So if you think merely from a very operationalization point of view, or research and development investment, right? So here, how much of the research and development investment has been done over a period of a time, right? So that will be a total stock, which will be important. Learning efforts, that means how much investment is now being done. Learning to learn means how much training is a part of that R&D investment to know about recent technologies, right? So then a firm's absorptive capacity is not simply the sum of the absorptive capacities of its employee at a more conceptual level. It is indeed a combination of it. The sum is more than a simple sum as such. The whole is bigger than the simple sum. So from an organization point of view, when we are talking about this absorptive capacity building, what you need is basically a communication with the external environment. It is only through this external environment you will get access to the newer things as to what is going on, what new scientific breakthroughs are coming through. But that should not be limited there itself. In fact, it is important that the different units within an organization also come together and communicate with each other. Otherwise, you will find that the information might get limited or being restricted to a particular area, and it may not actually spread out. That is why there is a need for these gatekeepers who would help you or facilitate this kind of a communication from one subunit to another subunit, bringing in the important external information that can enhance and build onto the existing internal information. The receptor, in case of uncertain technological change, the group's absorptive capacity will become very important and relevant. So clearly, communication is something which is of key here in order to identify, in order to discuss, to talk about it, and ensure that the newer technologies are now not only being absorbed, but also helping you to build a capability to develop further. So in this case, one very important point that is being raised, that but what about the specialization? Whether one company should specialize in only in one area and then, rather diversify and so on. And with respect to one technology also, you can think in terms of that. So clearly, there are certain positives on one side, that is that, you'll get a very in-depth knowledge and information about it. However, it may not help you in identifying the different applications and also where all the possible outcome or the uses of that particular technology can be. So, for instance, there is this particular Japanese practice of rotating their R&D personnel through marketing, operations, etc., which help in creating knowledge overlap, but at the same time enhances the diversity of the personnel. So, how do you do this absorptive capacity building within an organization is going to be extremely important. It could be either developed clearly or could be acquired. How it is acquired? It is acquired by hiring the new personnel, by contracting for consulting services, or even through corporate acquisitions. There is clearly a role of path dependence when we talk about absorptive capacity. Equipped with absorptive capacity in a particular area, now a firm may accumulate additional knowledge in the subsequent period only. So, existing expertise in the related field will improve the understanding, evaluation of the intermediate technological advancements as such. Then clearly there is a problem here also, because if there is implication of the cumulativeness and the path dependence, it can lead to the lockouts, right? So, you may not get information about the newer trends, newer things, because maybe your employees are not very comfortable with it. They may not be able to absorb it. So, that has a rather negative implication. Now, one question in this case arises that what would be the loan of our own R&D? Why not simply build this kind of an absorptive capacity within the organization and always bring in technology from outside? There you'll realize that in-house R&D is something which may in fact play a very significant role in building this absorptive capacity itself. So you do not see it as something which are substitute to each other, but rather something which complement each other as such. So then if you look at it, the company's own R&D will help them in building the absorptive capacity and lead to the then apart from that, there would be an information which will be coming through the external industry knowledge, maybe to the university, competitors, etc. And the existing knowledge actually reach out to that, learn from that, and brought it together to as an important sources of the firm's technical knowledge. So from a firm point of view, what are the different sources through which the technical knowledge is rather brought through? Is clearly it will include the own R&D, which can also help them in building their own absorptive capacity. This absorptive capacity also kind of a link with the external industry knowledge sources, including the university and maybe other competitors, and all of them together formulate the different sources through which the technological knowledge build up. And this building of the technical knowledge is something which is going to help the buyer in terms of absorbing any type of a newer technology which they might be getting it from the other sellers. It plays, as I said earlier, a very significant role in terms of the absorption of the newer technology. Apart from that, the concept is very important in the economics of innovation as such.